The White House has announced plans to send a delegation to Islamabad for talks with Iran's foreign minister this weekend. The meetings are expected to be exploratory in nature, with President Trump dispatching two of his close advisers to lead the discussions. It comes shortly after US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed the US blockade of the Strait of Hormuz was being expanded to target Iranian-linked ships in any ocean. Mike Hanna reports from Washington, D.C.
Another day into this extended ceasefire, and finally it appears there is movement on the US side.
The president has decided to dispatch Special Envoy Witkoff and Jared Kushner back to Islamabad. The Iranians want to talk. They want to talk in person, and so the president is, as I've said many times to all of you, always willing to give diplomacy a chance. So Steve and Jared will be heading to Pakistan tomorrow to hear the Iranians out. We hope progress will be made, and we hope that positive developments will come from this meeting.
Earlier, the Defense Secretary said there had been an intensification of the blockade of Iranian ports and vessels. He confirmed a third aircraft carrier group had been sent to the region, the first time three carriers have been in the same theatre of operation in 23 years. He also said the action against Iranian-linked shipping had gone, in his words, global.
Just this week, we seized two Iranian dark fleet ships in the Indo-Pacific region that had left Iranian ports before the blockade went into effect. They thought they'd made it out just in time. They did not. We seized their sanctioned ships, and we will seize more. Our blockade is growing and going global.
We're enforcing the blockade across the board against any ship of any nationality that is transiting to or from an Iranian port or territory. We're closely tracking vessels of interest headed towards Iran and those moving away from Iran that were outside the blockade area.
These talks in Islamabad will be slightly different from the last failed session in the Pakistan capital. Then the US delegation was led by the Vice President. This time, JD Vance will remain in Washington, but the White House says that he and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, will travel to Islamabad and join the talks should the envoys report movement to a more substantive rather than exploratory position. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera at the White House.
All right, let's go live to Tehran and the White House, where we begin now with our chief US correspondent, Alan Fisher. Alan, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner being sent back to Islamabad. What more do we know?
Well, I think the key phrase from Caroline Leavitt was, we want to hear the Iranians out. The White House say that the Iranians approach the United States, that they have something substantive to discuss, and so the Americans want to hear exactly what may well be on the table. The fact that JD Vance isn't going suggests that these are just exploratory talks. And if there is something significant, substantive there, then he and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, will head towards Islamabad and try and tie up a final deal. But of course, there are many areas of dispute between the two countries, not least three you can think of off the top of your head. First of all, Donald Trump has often said Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon, not now, not ever. There is the question over who runs the Strait of Hormuz and whether or not it can ever be closed by the Iranians again in the future. And then there is something that's important to the United States. They say it's important to their allies in the region, and that is Iran's support for proxies around the area. So those things have to be discussed and have to be sorted out before there can be any sort of deal. But of course, if there's going to be a deal, and Donald Trump says he's wanting the right deal, the correct deal, a proper deal, rather than one that's rushed into, then they have to start talking somewhere. And it seems like Islamabad this weekend is the place to start. What is interesting that in the last couple of hours here in Washington, D.C., a fairly senior Republican, Roger Wicker, he is the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, so quite a big deal. He says the time for negotiation is done. Effectively, you cannot trust any deal that the Ayatollah or his successors will make, and they should restart the bombing campaign right now. Donald Trump isn't quite ready to do that. He's willing to give some time to the discussions, but clearly his patience will not last forever, and there has to be something significant on the table if JD Vance is to fly to Islamabad and there's to be an end to this war.
All right, we watch and see. Alan Fisher, chief US correspondent, joining us from the White House. Thank you. We'll be live to Tehran in a moment, but first let's get the view from Islamabad, where the Iranian delegation, led by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, has landed. Osama bin Javed is in the Pakistani capital following developments.
Abbas Araghchi was welcomed by the Pakistani Foreign Minister as well as the Pakistani Chief of Defence Forces, Field Marshal Asim Munir. There have been a number of phone calls ahead of the visit between the Iranians and the Pakistanis, including both civilian and the military leadership. In these conversations that we've had with a number of sources, cautious optimism is the word we keep hearing from Pakistani sources, who say that just the fact that they are coming back to Islamabad is an indication that there is some movement. Although the positions remain poles apart, there is still the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz by the United States in place, which according to Iranians is not acceptable. The Iranians previously indicated they do not want to negotiate with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who according to them were not very fruitful negotiators when they met them in Geneva. But it appears that there is some melting of the ice. There is a thaw that the Pakistanis have been able to bring in, and they're hopeful that this will result in something. Now, the clarity with which you've been hearing the US government say that they are coming in for face-to-face talks, we have not heard yet from the Pakistanis or the Iranians. So it will be a wait-and-see game again on how much agreement there is. What are the points that they're willing to agree to let go, and what are the red lines that they're not willing to compromise on? I asked the Pakistani Information Minister about the hope that he has for a possible second round, and he said, well, because all lines of communication are open, because no side has rejected the Pakistani offer for a second round, there is still hope, not just of a second round, but Pakistanis want to use this opportunity for lasting peace in the region. Osama bin Javed, Al Jazeera, Islamabad.
Iran's Foreign Ministry Affairs spokesperson Ismail Baghai has taken to X to say, "We arrive in Islamabad, Pakistan for an official visit. Foreign Minister Araghchi will be meeting with Pakistani high-level officials in concert with their ongoing mediation and good officers for ending an American-imposed war of aggression and the restitution of peace in our region." No meeting is planned to take place between Iran and the United States. Iran's observations would be conveyed to Pakistan. Well, Al-Migdad Al-Ruhaid's live for us in Tehran now. And Al-Migdad, what does this tell us about Tehran's willingness to further talks with the view of reaching a peace deal?
Yeah, let me start by this latest statement from Ismail Baghai, who is a spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry. He made it clear and ruled out any kind of his expectations of next round of talks, at least for now. And instead, he made it clear that there is no planned meetings with the United States at the moment. Instead, the position of Iran's and Tehran here will be conveyed through Pakistan. The positions definitely have been made it clearly in the past few days in a unified message that what we could describe by the position here in Tehran, same in position, same in their stance over the past few days. They will negotiate they will not negotiate under pressure. They will not negotiate under this blockade by the United States over the Strait of Hormuz, and also they will not negotiate under threat, under the rhetoric threat imposed by the President Trump. This what we have been hearing in the past few days, especially from Masoud Pezeshkian, who is the president of the Islamic Republic of Iran. At the same time, we are seeing a diplomatic effort being moving forward by the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. He's right now in Islamabad, speaking that he's focused on coordination with his neighbors, and he will be landed hours ahead in Moscow and Oman, as he described as a coordination with his neighbor, and not for a direct talk with a United States in Islamabad. Instead, they are linking any direct talk by the same conditions and conditions that will be must be met, imposed, especially imposed the blockade over the Strait of Hormuz, and also they are leaving the door open for diplomacy, at least for at this moment.
Al-Migdad Al-Ruhayd joining us live from Tehran. Thank you. The Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, has received a phone call from US President Donald Trump on Friday. The Emir stressed the need to de-escalate tensions in the region and support peaceful solutions. The two leaders reviewed the latest regional developments, the ceasefire agreement between the US and Iran. They also discussed the repercussions of the situation on maritime security and global supply chains. Sina Tusi is a senior fellow at the Centre for International Policy, where his work focuses on US-Iran relations. He says the uncertainty surrounding the talks reflects the deep mistrust between Tehran and Washington.
Both sides have a lot of political pressure on them, and managing the political pressure is itself a challenge. So neither side wants to be seen that it is caving into pressure, that it is coming into these talks from a position of weakness. Arguably, the Iranians have a bigger burden in this regard because they were in the middle of negotiations twice with the United States when the United States and Israel launched surprise military attacks against them. And especially Witkoff and Jared Kushner being the envoys that are now reportedly being dispatched. Iran has a very bad experience with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, that they are the ones who Iran was in the middle of negotiations with last June when Israel attacked. Iran was in the middle of negotiations with in February when they attacked. So they had previously made clear that they did not want to negotiate with them. And Trump dispatched JD Vance, which marked the first kind of negotiations at the vice presidential level between the US and Iran since the 1979 Iranian Revolution. So this time, if JD Vance or if Witkoff and Kushner are going, it seems, the Iranians are saying they're not going to negotiate. And I think if it's them, it's probably more likely that they will not meet directly, publicly at least.